On today's Apple Daily, Intel desperately scrapes together some tests where they beat M1. Apple wants their toys back. Apple Car is not what you think, says Jon Prosser. Plus, a whole bunch of iCave answers.
For the latest Apple news, rumors, and leaks, every weekday at 12 UTC. Join us in the iCave.
I'm iCave Dave and I simplify Apple so everything just works for you. And if you want the latest Apple news, leaks and rumours every weekday at 12 UTC, like this video, subscribe to the channel and ring the notification bell so that you don't miss a thing, and post up #NotificationSquad down in the comments so that I can give you a shout out at the end of the next video. Intel desperately scrapes together some tests where they beat M1. Now that Intel has a new CEO in place, it's becoming clearer how worried they are about the impact of Apple Silicon on their business. Exhibit A, their carefully selected graphs where they find a handful of tests that their latest 11th gen Core i9 1185G7 with twice the thread count and a 4.8 GHz clock can win, before switching that one out for a very different chip when testing battery life. They also switched out the MacBook Pro for the lower battery life MacBook Air to give the PC laptop a chance too. I mean, it still lost, but it wasn't by the massive amount it would have been against the MacBook Pro. They also then claimed that the M1 couldn't do stuff like start a video conference in Zoom, which is odd as my wife spends most of her days doing exactly that on the MacBook Air with M1. So having brought out their big guns, I wonder what they'll do after March the 16th, when we're expecting our first look at the M1X and Apple Silicon iMac, and less likely, but for many more exciting, MacBook Pro 16-inch. The M1X is expected to at least double, but quite possibly triple the number of high-performance Firestorm cores at the disposal of the system, along with higher memory options and support for all the displays you could ever want. Apple wants their toys back. The developer transition kit, a Mac Mini body housing an iPad Pro A12Z SoC with 16GB of memory and 500GB of storage that Apple distributed to developers ahead of Apple Silicon's public launch for $500 a piece, has reached the end of its life and is being recalled by Apple. This seems to have displeased many developers, as they were originally to have these for a year of development, and now after 7 months, several of which were apparently so buggy as to be unusable, Apple is asking for them back and was offering a $200 credit towards an Apple Silicon Mac on the return. This has now been increased to $500, which seems to have helped. But of course many developers have already invested in an M1 device, though the credit, as far as I'm aware, can be spent on anything at Apple. So its software updates have now been cut off, but developers who did update to the macOS 11.3 beta found some of the connectivity disabled on the devices too. Now, I'm typically on Apple's side in most cases, but here there seems to have been a few, let's say, communications issues, assuming what we've heard to be accurate, and when the native Apple Silicon apps are so few and far between, it might pay them well to offer a few more socially distanced e-hugs to those who have the power to fix it. Just saying. Apple Car is not what you think, says Jon Prosser. In a Sunday tweet, serial Apple leaker and person who occasionally superchats this channel, Jon Prosser, said that Apple Car is not what you think, and I have a feeling I might know what he means. While everyone's talking about how it can rival Tesla, see our iCave answers later, I don't think that Apple is making anything like that at all. Recent reports have said that the car is not designed to have a driver and that Apple is focusing on the last mile, autonomy that doesn't just kick in at the freeway, but is doorstep to doorstep, and that the car might not even have the layout of a conventional car with luxuries like steering wheels or brake pedals. Now, with fully autonomous vehicles, individual ownership makes less and less sense, and they can be thought of more as a taxi service that collects you when you need them and goes off to the next person's ride when you don't. Driverless Uber, if you like, but with a car like this. But if you had a car like this, being able to earn money from having it carry others when you're not needing it could help offset the cost. Alternatively, a company like Apple could operate the entire fleet so that when you need to go somewhere, you just book it through an app on your phone or Siri and away you go. Now, it's a difficult thing for some people to envisage. Not owning your own vehicle but allowing them to be managed by the cloud could actually massively reduce traffic, pollution, as much of a vehicle's environmental impact is actually at the manufacturer, and having a shared fleet like this absolutely reduces the number of vehicles that you need. and means instead of spending an hour in traffic driving to work, you can spend the time doing what you like, as your commute now only takes 30 minutes and you don't have to be in charge of it while it goes. Many people don't trust AI to drive, but even Tesla's limited self-driving so far has showed that statistically it's at least twice as safe as a human driver in terms of how many miles can be driven on average between accidents. But what do you think about the prospect of shared vehicles? Apple One may be about to get a lot more expensive each month. Next we get into iCaveAnswers, and if you want a question answered on the show, all you need to do is use the hashtag iCaveAnswers down in the comments section of any of our videos, and I will answer in the next news video that we do. First up, a question from X, and they ask: the first Apple Glass will rely on the iPhone like the original Apple Watch did. Do you think it could ever be possible to use the glasses untethered from the phone? I can't see the technology ever getting that good because I don't feel like hardware improves quick enough. Now that does make sense because Apple in the past has offloaded a lot of the processing from Apple Watch onto the iPhone, but it seems like Apple is not planning to do that with Apple Glass, or at least with the Apple headset that's coming first. Now we've had some of the first news on this headset come out over the past couple of days, and it's looking like they're going to be running twin 8K displays, one for each eye. So the amount of processing power that you need for that is quite high end, and it's at the moment it looks like we're going to be using chips that are more powerful than M1 in order to actually power those goggles. Now right now we are talking about the big full-on headset, not a pair of elegant little Apple glasses. By all accounts it looks very much like they are going to be independently powered. I would think that there will be a lot of control that you still do from your iPhone and things like setup. I don't think the initial versions will be set up independently. I think you will set them up from your phone, or you will set them up from any Apple device. It could even be that you can set it up just using a watch, using NFC, and all you need to do is tap it against it and it can grab all of your information from your Apple ID. That's the sort of thing that Apple is getting really good at doing now. So like when you set up a new watch or a new iPhone, it's a very, very smooth process, and I think even with new pieces of hardware they could do exactly the same. But in terms of day-to-day, it looks like all the processing is going to be on board for these things. Next up, Ben KP. iCaveAnswers. Occasionally the touchpad on my M1 MacBook Pro does not work from startup. I have to restart my computer to get it working. Has anyone else had intermittent problems with the touchpad? Now, I don't have the MacBook Pro, my wife has got the Air, but we haven't had this issue so far, at least. So it's not something that I'm aware of. If anyone in the audience has had this problem, then please let us know in the comments. But one thing I would ask you is, are you using a genuine power supply, and does this happen when it's plugged into power and not plugged into power? There was an issue with some of the older MagSafe MacBooks where if it was plugged into a non-genuine power supply, you would quite often have a very glitchy trackpad. So I don't know if it's something that's related to that. If you're using a different non-Apple USB-C adapter, I don't know if that's still a problem, but it certainly was with the MagSafe ones. So that's the only suggestion that I have. But anyone that's had this kind of problem with a connected internal trackpad on a MacBook Pro with M1, please let us know down in the comments so we can see if we can crowdsource a solution here. Next up, James Apple. It wouldn't make sense for Apple to sell an iPhone with Touch ID fingerprint reader due to the current beta of iOS 14.5 and watchOS 7.4 for both iPhone and Apple Watch, because you are able to unlock your watch with the phone, and rather you can unlock your phone with the watch now as well. I couldn't see them fixing the Face ID problem and selling you a $200 solution to buy an Apple Watch. Apple has a history of fixing a problem and then making you buy the solution for it, i.e. getting rid of the headphone jack to sell more AirPods. Thoughts? I'm not convinced that Apple removed the headphone jack in order to sell more AirPods, because they gave you the adapter in the box that you could just plug into your headphones. So I don't think that was the reason for it. I think it moved people that way, and it was certainly a move towards a wireless future, which we are now getting closer and closer to when they're going to get rid of that port. Absolutely. That will sell some more AirPods. But in terms of the fingerprint sensor on the iPhone, it is in testing at the moment. Again, this coming from Jon Prosser. He has seen, I believe, evidence of at least 2 handsets that have got different versions of this under-display fingerprint sensor, which is ultrasonic as well rather than being capacitive, which means that it would work with wet hands, it would work even if you've got dirty hands, all that sort of thing. So it removes a few of the issues that we've had previously. If you've got very dry skin, then sometimes it wouldn't register. None of that would be a problem with this. And it would be in conjunction with Face ID as well. So you would have the option of using your fingerprint or your face, or potentially now your watch as well. So you're going to have multiple ways. And something that Rene Ritchie has spoken about in the past is kind of Person ID or UID. The iPhone and your other devices would kind of keep track of how likely it is that you are still in possession of your devices based on how close it is to other devices, which ones you've accessed recently, your behaviour, and also things like this fingerprint sensor being in the display. It might not be just registering it every time you touch, but also just kind of keeping track of whether it is you that's still using the phone or if it's been handed off to someone else, and then maybe it could alert you on your watch that someone else is using your phone, because people in their families will quite often hand them out between different people will use them for different times. Like, for example, if we're sitting on the couch and my wife wants to look something up and her phone's on charge somewhere else, I'll hand it to her. You know, it's one of those things. So it could be that there's things like that that come in the future where your iPhone is keeping track of actually who's holding it, and learning kind of who you've allowed to hold it and who you've allowed to use it in the past, and then could lock itself down if someone else picked it up. Imagine if your phone automatically locked itself when someone else used the screen because they don't have your fingerprints. That would be so secure, it would be untrue. But that, I think, is kind of where they're going with the multiple biometrics, rather than stopping you from buying an Apple Watch. Hopefully that makes sense. And finally, from Viberlion, question: why is Apple making a car? What makes them want to enter the vehicle market, and how will it compete against Tesla? So I know we've kind of covered a few of these bits already, but Apple would be making a very different car to a Tesla. Tesla kind of started off, the way that Tesla started was with the Roadster, which was very small quantities and high price, with the original Roadster, which was based on a Lotus Elise. Then they moved on to the Model S, which was a high-priced sedan, but not as high-priced as the Roadster, so it brought it to more of the market and they could build more cars. Then they brought out the Model X, which just opened them up to another market segment. Then they get to the 3 and the Model Y, which are the kind of more mass-market models. The Cybertruck is going to be probably even more popular than any of these. They've made it in a way that they can build a huge number. Now, I think what Apple would be doing is very much looking at a very small proportion of the market. I don't think they're looking to build something for everyone, but maybe they are going to do a range. Maybe they're going to do very affordable cars. Maybe they're going to target the Chinese market for normal people. But I think the main thing that Apple is looking at is more about the autonomy and the complete self-driving, where you don't have the option of driving it yourself. And by the time it comes out, in about 5 years, regulations will probably have changed to the point where it is quite a possible thing to do. So I think that's probably the way that Apple's going. I know a lot of people were talking about Apple just creating autonomy software and then selling it to other car makers. That doesn't look like what's happening at all when they're hiring chassis engineers from Porsche, and they've been talking to Kia and Hyundai about actually building the cars for them. They are building cars. It is going to happen. It's just a case of how long will it take. It looks like 2025 right now, but I think they're going to build something that does not act like a regular car. Apple only gets into a market when they can completely change it. If you look at what they did with the iPhone in the first place, we went from phones with physical keyboards to phones that had no buttons really on them at all, apart from the home button, and everything else changed. And I think that might be what they do with the car, whereas Tesla has basically taken what a car looks like and put an electric motor into it and made it better. Apple might completely change what a car is. You might have seating configured differently. There'd be no steering wheel at all because the computer will take care of all of it because it's better at it than you. It's a very different kind of thing, and I think that's the way that Apple will go. Nobody knows until it actually happens, but I think it could be more of like a work pod that moves around with you in it, rather than a vehicle that you can hoon about at a drag strip with. And I have to say, I do want a Tesla. I want that Cybertruck. One day. Please subscribe so that I can get there. But that wraps up today's show. Thank you so much for watching. If you want a shout out, remember all you need to do is #NotificationSquad down in the comments when you subscribe to the channel and rung the bell. Then you will get a shout out at the end of the next video. Or you can ask a question like the guys that just had theirs answered did. using hashtag iCaveAnswers. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.